Okay, hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Masculinity Unmasked, the fortnightly conversation that delves deep into what it means to be a man in the 21st century. So, the topic of conversation for today's episode is vulnerability and self-compassion in leadership. How important is it? And as always, I'm joined by my co-host and fellow coach, Greg Steyan. Hi, Greg. And this evening, we're very fortunate to have with us as well award-winning founder and life coach for driven leaders, Simon Tomkins. So, Simon and I know each other as I do some associate coaching work with his organization, Simon Tomkins Coaching, which helps leaders find balance in their lives. So, Simon, thanks very much for joining us this evening. Do you want to start by sharing a little bit about yourself and the sort of work that you do?
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks both for having me. Genuinely really good to be here. It's such an important conversation. So it's a pleasure to just have a space like this to talk about something so important.
Mm.
I guess my journey into coaching was very organic. I fell into sales roles in my early 20s, and as I progressed through those sales roles, I became increasingly just in, deeply interested and passionate about, I guess, personal development and how people communicate and how we can influence each other. And
Mm.
then when I got my own sales team to lead, I got amazing leadership training and I realized, how awesome leadership is, how much I enjoyed it. And that ultimately led into coaching because as leaders, you can coach people. And I lived and worked in a pretty sort of fast-paced world, living in London
Mm.
and running sales teams, high pressure. There's that tendency to sort of overwork certainly parts of me that would lead me to push really hard. And so, a big part of my mission these days is to help people find balance. I
Mm.
took a career break, went around the world for 14 months um, about 5 years ago, and that was a really amazing opportunity to reset. So that brings me here talking about balance, talking about leadership, and talking about coaching.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to delve into all of that. And it's interesting. It's like the hero's journey story, bringing back the boon for others. Yeah, you've been on that sort of journey yourself, and you're bringing back those skills now for everybody else around leadership. So, based on your sort of experience working with leaders, then why is this such an important topic, particularly talking about vulnerability and self-compassion?
There's so many answers I could give to this. I think I think really the essence of it to me is it's about creating a world where everyone can really thrive. And I
Mm.
guess I mean that personally and professionally, and where people have confidence and where they're not afraid to sort of share their voice. There are so many styles of leadership. I'm sure we're going to talk about that tonight.
Mm.
But leading through vulnerability and self-compassion enables people, really, really to show up in a very authentic way and enables people to really be themselves. And I think there's so much good that comes from that.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Simon, great to have you here. And that was a fantastic story. We talked a little bit off air, so hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot, but we're talking a little bit about the great resignation, quiet quitting. I think that's all linked to, even you leaving sales, for example, and all our different stories. In a way, we've lived that ourselves, looking for more out of life, more balance. I know that's a big aspect for you. The stats were overwhelming for the great resignation when it happened, and 70% of leaders openly talk about quitting or looking for something new. Um, and the basis of it is to have more balance, is to find more time to be a better person. Do you find that with the sort of clients that you work with, the sort of people do you coach? What's your message there, and what do you recommend?
In terms of the great resignation, as I said to you, it's a new term to me, but I get it. I think I I meet a lot of people who have an ambition to retire early. I'll say that. Whether that might be retire at 40, and I I speak to a lot of people who have made it possible for themselves to do that. Um, to me, that's you know, not necessarily a goal that um, that serves people that well in life. It's kind of this kind of all or nothing approach, and I think it highlights that maybe we feel the need to retire so we can kind of be free and do what we want with our time. That we haven't got a career and space that makes us feel fulfilled and allows us to balance all the areas of life that are um, important to us. So um, you said like, what do I recommend? I guess I help people see that there might be an alternative path forward where they can do a job or run a business that they enjoy, that brings purpose and meaning to them, and that they can find a way of doing it that allows them to have balance in their life so they've got time for all the things that matter. So it doesn't have to be I'll retire at 40 so I can then spend time with my family and do the things I love. Actually, you can have a career that allows you to do that. And a big part of that, the key to that, is the self-compassion piece and the vulnerability piece, as I see it, because um, that's what enables this kind of more balanced approach.
Mhm.
Quite often, because I'll just to say the link there, because it's probably not immediately obvious, is that the reason why so many people feel the need to push so hard is this kind of needing to prove something to themselves, about what they're capable of. And when we can be more vulnerable with ourselves and we can have some more self-compassion, we can start to realize we don't need to push. We don't need to sort of, make it and then retire and then have this life. We can find a different path.
Mhm.
That's a really good answer. Yeah. The reason I was talking about the great resignation and quiet quitting is I picked up on the idea of balance, the idea of self compassion, loving yourself more. And when you looked at that famous study and you realize why so many high level people wanted to leave their jobs, 70%, that's what they were talking about. I remember I was telling you off air that lots of these guys on average were spending, 2.1 hours a week with their children, working 60, 70 hours a week, actually working out more than they were spending out at home, working out in the gym more than hours they were spending at home.
Mm.
And I was linking that back, wasn't I, to self-determination theory, where instead of looking at money, you look at different ways to assess their performance, competence, time they spend with their family, being a dad, all this sort of stuff. And I thought that linked in really well to what you were saying. Actually, sometimes there's more to life, isn't there, than earning money. There's much more to life, and I think that's a great chat to have, and for our listeners to realize actually to be rounded, there's more aspects than to be successful than just earning money. But Simon, thanks for that. I think
Mhm.
that was a great answer.
Yeah, it's a great point, Greg, because a lot of the people that I work with as well, when we look at value, we often think about monetary value, but we don't look at, for example, time as a resource and time as value. Um, so there's other types of value that we can have in our lives, and especially leaders who are very time poor, the monetary value is only one piece. And actually, what a lot of those people crave is, having more time with family, being more present with family, for example, or having time to be able to go and do the hobbies that they want. Um, so I think that's a really great point you've just mentioned there. What I'm thinking sitting here is, okay, well, our listeners could be hearing these words, self-compassion, vulnerability, but without further explanation, those terms could seem just like buzzwords. So what actually do we mean by vulnerability and self-compassion? What are your thoughts in relation to that, Simon?
Yeah, it's a good, great point, isn't it? And I think I would start by saying probably everybody needs to find their own meaning, in what that means to them. But definitely, it's not. We don't want to be thinking about them just as buzzwords or as kind of tick boxes or just sort of, then it's not necessarily needs to be something that's kind of extreme as well. In it's a sort of it's probably sits on a sliding scale, right? It's like you're not vulnerable or not vulnerable, or what's the opposite of unvulnerable, guys? Vulnerable. You're not vulnerable or unvulnerable.
Yeah.
There we go. You're somewhere on that scale of vulnerability. So I think that's important to think about. Like, same with self-compassion. You're not self-compassionate or not. You're
Mm,
somewhere on that scale. And we're just looking to maybe get people to think about being a bit more vulnerable and a bit more self-compassionate. I think to me it's kind of like It's about being authentic and it's about being understanding. It's looking to understand yourself and it's looking to understand others and um and to kind of let go of fear, let go of needing to judge ourselves or judge others as well.
Mm,
Just be who you are and learning to be comfortable with who you are and letting other people see who you are um, without having to kind of put on a facade or a mask, as a term we've used before. That's what I
mm,
mean by it. It's just seeking to understand yourself and seeking to understand others and let go of judgments whilst doing that.
mm,
A great answer, Simon. One part I love there, you're talking about levels or a scale of vulnerability, but it makes me think as well that everyone is vulnerability and you can't hide from it. But we all just obviously have it in different levels or different ways. Another thing we talked about off air earlier was, maybe different coaching styles. I openly told you that before, I work with people from the US or abroad, and I can see a trend changing, in terms of this, that I think traditionally, in terms of leadership or sales, whatever, it's been to break people down, to say you're not good enough, to say that you don't earn enough money, to say that you don't look good enough. And I feel like there has been a great reset in that moving forward, which leads me into so much to what you've just said, is that actually that, I know we were talking about baller busters, Andy Elliott, so these sort of type is almost on the way out. And what you're talking about, the great reset is a way in. Would you agree with that? Do you think there's a trend here? Do you think that I openly asked you before that the great resignation plateaued, but has it? Are we seeing something new? Are we seeing a new trend in terms of leadership and men being more open about vulnerability? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, honestly, my thoughts are, I don't know. I think is the first thing that comes to me. I think there's probably different trends happening in different circles, right? In
Mm,
different pockets and in different countries and in you know, um, different spaces. I mean, I think in the corporate world, I would imagine that things are kind of how they've always been. There might be in certain companies, right, might be pushing this more, but different industries, I think industries will vary. I think there's a lot of spaces where it's probably how it's how it's always been, which is show up at work and kind of put on your professional
absolutely. Yeah.
exterior and turn up. But I think maybe there's more forward thinking um, spaces or companies where there's a bit of a movement. I mean, I think it's genuinely quite hard to comment for me because I'm in the coaching world. I'm in a space. My colleagues, my industry now is obviously not representative of the general trend. Um, and I really don't absorb much media, if I'm honest. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I take your lead on that, Greg. I think you probably
I
more.
can really help you with this actually, and actually, there's going to be a change with the. I know Keir Starmer come out and spoke about the NHS. There's going to be some real big changes moving forward in this space. In America, therapy, coaching can be a tax exemption. They can use it as part of their everyday life, especially in works incorporate it in terms of pay, that sort of stuff. That will happen here. That is always going to happen. And I think that is a leads into really well into what you said about this finding more balance. I would coin that as the great reset, which was from the great resignation, which is openly talking about that idea of why you left sales, to go into this space. Actually, we're becoming a lot more mindful. Wellness, it's something that men are becoming a lot more open about. And I can go into this even more. Think that coaching is the second largest growing business in the world in terms of this space. With men, the amount of men that are actually now coming forward to move into coaching spaces is at new levels, if that makes sense. So it's an exciting time to be here. And all that sort of mindfulness balance that you're talking about is this new era, I think. And I'm really interested to see where that
Mm.
where that goes. But what's your thoughts on this, Max? Because obviously, me and you talk about this every week, and openly want our clients to have take homes from these sort of sessions. What's your thought? Do you see a trend? Do you see a change?
Mm. Well, I think at the end of the day, we're all human, and as humans, vulnerability is scary and takes courage. And what a lot of us do, myself included in my sort of career history, is to wear a mask. So a lot of the time when I start out with a client, they might feel the need to wear a mask until that trust is established in that coaching relationship. Um, and it's sort of my job as part of that relationship is to help them slide that mask to one side and show that it's a safe place to be vulnerable. Um, and that's a journey in and of itself. But I think that's, across the board. I've been in, when I was in the corporate world, I know I was heavily masked up, and then when I went and got sort of coaching, therapy, whatever it was, it took time for those masks to come off. And in my own experience, someone coming in and being very directive and almost shutting me down would just not have worked. Someone holding space, being compassionate, demonstrating the skills, reflecting the skills back that we're talking about here around vulnerability. So demonstrating vulnerability, demonstrating compassion, those are the things that would enable me to help move that mask to the side. So I think thinking about it in sort of coaching spaces in which I've operated, that's always been my go-to as a coach, but also what I've found most receptive. So I think it's a great question, and I think it's a really interesting one. And I think that there's so many different trends out there. It's hard to keep on top of what's going on where, and we can all sort of have different takes on this and look at it through different lenses. But I think it's a great question. But going back to the authenticity point, Simon, you were talking about vulnerability as leading from a space of authenticity and then self-compassion, understanding. If we're thinking about the challenges that leaders face around masking, burnout, imposter syndrome, those sorts of things, what does showing up more authentically and showing up with more understanding actually achieve for leaders? If we're looking at it through the context of those challenges.
Sure. And just to clarify, do you mean does it achieve for them personally or for the people around them or both?
Great question. Let's explore both. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Um, I think starting with for them, because you mentioned burnout. So obviously, as a company, we specialize in helping people that are facing stress, burnout, and generally have high pressure roles.
Mm,
High pressure roles. So being a CEO or an MD or a head of sales or something like that sounds like a high pressure role, but the majority of that actual pressure comes from within, comes from the person inside, right? Yes, it's a job
mm,
title, and there's a because of the compensation package that comes with that and the responsibility. There's an expectation there externally
mm,
from people to deliver, right? But people don't get to those roles by accident. They get there because they're really competent, capable people, and they work their way to those positions.
mm,
But when they get there, we have these things like imposter syndrome or imposter thoughts, right? That come along, doubt, and needing to prove themselves. And all of that is self-imposed type of pressure, the kind of judgment. Like, so we have things like, I need to have all the answers now
mm,
because I'm the CEO. So when I'm in a room, everyone looks at me and says, I'm the CEO and I'm paid the big bucks, so I need to have all the answers, right? So being vulnerable in that case might simply mean saying, what do you think? Right? To me, it might literally mean the CEO saying to the people around him, what do you think? I'm not sure on this one, guys. Like, that could be being vulnerable. And that really just means a person being a person and being authentic, saying, I'm not sure on the answer, but there's
mm,
lots of great, there's great minds in this room. Let's get together. Like, to me, that's being vulnerable. That's being authentic. But it's also, it takes courage. As you said, it's being brave. And then
mm,
therefore, it's also demonstrating huge confidence.
mm.
So I'll try and rein myself in here because I get really excited and I could just say loads of things. So I'll stop, but I think the bit I want to leave it on is a reframe for anyone that being vulnerable is being confident. Because if as a
Mm,
leader you can walk into a room and go, I'm not sure, what do you think? that demonstrates massive confidence.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much wisdom in there. And I'm just thinking of it through that that sort of gendered lens as well as men in leadership as well. And I know that you don't just work with men, but I'm just thinking, this is masculinity unmasked. So just thinking it through that gendered lens, how men can get trapped, uh, when it comes to vulnerability, because Paul Kivel and Tony Ford talk about this, but this idea of a man box that we all grow up with, which is like a set of rules that we all have. So, be tough, don't show weakness, um, be the provider at all times, if need be aggressive, be dominant. And there's certainly a shutdown when it comes to any form of emotional vulnerability. So that process can feel quite alien for anyone, especially men, and even more so, I imagine, men in leadership. Um, so I guess it's a challenge that a lot of people can face sort of higher up the ranks with that level of conditioning, and I guess it's how we unpack some of that. And what comes up for me there is the importance of modeling of vulnerability, right? Seeing leaders that are doing this stuff, seeing leaders that are showing up and being authentic and are demonstrating understanding with their teams, um, that are focusing on collaboration rather than competition, and integrity rather than dominance, and balance and ambition rather than burnout and driving at all costs. Um, but yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I don't know if either of you had any thoughts on it through that sort of lens, that gendered lens.
It's a really good question. I think for men in particular, they have an ideal in their mind of something that they need to achieve, like a way they need to act, a way they need to talk. Social comparison theory. And it's really interesting actually talking about being authentic. It's all about, coming back to setting their own standards, their own goals, isn't it? Not comparing themselves to others or even thinking about what others should think that they achieve. That's one of the take homes that I would give, to my sort of clients, sort of people that I work with, is self-determination theory, is set your own standards that you want to achieve. But Simon, I'd
Mhm.
love to know, this obviously gets shared, to our communities, to our clients. Any take homes for the people that are listening? Any sort of great gems that you could pass on?
I've already used my gems. No, sorry.
Let, let's
Being
let's let's hear
vulnerable.
some more.
There's the there's my vulnerability.
Yeah, let's note that vulnerability. I like that.
Yeah, I'm all out. I think actually, like, jokes aside, um, I think being a bit light-hearted, I think, is vulnerability. So I'll just put that out
Mm,
there. I think it's okay to self-deprecate in leadership, and uh to lighten things up, right? We get so
Yeah,
heavy in this world, sometimes, and again, that comes from judgment and pressure we put on ourselves to sort of perform and excel and have all the answers. So we can just lighten things up sometimes by joking, or being more light-hearted. I think that's really powerful. I do think the reframe of being vulnerable and authentic as being confident is a really powerful one. That's helped me coach uh, male and female leaders at all different levels who've understood that actually, wow, I don't need to sort of struggle with leading this team anymore by always feeling like I need to be the loudest voice, the most confident voice, and the one that has all the answers. I can um, take the role of the sort of participative leader. I can ask other people to bring in their ideas. I can take a back seat in a meeting. I can be quieter. I don't have to put pressure on myself to show up in a certain way. And people have managed to do that by the reframe of actually just leaning into my own style and admitting I don't have all the answers all the time, and being a bit more human is a form of confidence that people will really respect. So I think that's
mm,
massive. The other one is the link with burnout. I guess burnout doesn't come from working long hours, right? Burnout comes from the emotional strain and weight that's associated with doing our jobs and often at the same time working really, really hard. And
Mm.
the burnout comes from putting pressure on ourselves to excel to the highest level, to please everyone around us, to maintain the highest possible standards, and do it all whilst kind of keeping up an exterior of, yeah, I'm okay, I've got this, I'm on top of everything. That is what causes burnout. If you can find the courage to actually be open with the people around you, whether it's your husband or wife, or whether it's, other people on your board of at work, to say, I'm really tired at the moment. I'm feeling the weight of our sales targets. I'm not sure about some of the decisions I'm making. I could use some support. If you can do stuff like that, not only will it enable people around you to show up and for them all to be more authentic, so you have this amazing sort of halo effect, but you'll take so much pressure off yourself. And in taking pressure off yourself, you'll be healthier, you'll be lighter, and you'll avoid burnout, and you'll actually be able to sustain the work you're trying to do.
Mm. Love that. Thanks, Simon. Greg, any final thoughts on this?
Oh, just one. Simon, thank you so much. What a great story and some great take homes for the people that are listening. One thing that I admire about you across all your social media channels is some of the honesty. Like I saw a wonderful picture of you and your wife on your honeymoon, but also the latest one with the puppy, and you were talking to us about relating coaching to the puppy. I loved it, and in a way, that's having vulnerability, isn't it? In terms of like being macho, alpha, etc., etc. Talk us through that. I loved it, and I can imagine some of the people listening would love to hear that story as well.
It is a message about my little puppy, Nala.
But I love the story about relating a puppy to
Ah,
human behavior. It was great.
thank you. Obviously, I wanted and needed a way to get the most sort of clickbaity objects in my life into my social media. Let's be honest with that. But genuinely, it was a great opportunity because, uh, by the way, I'm not being modest here, but she is one of the best trained 13-week-year-old puppies you'll ever meet. I took her down to Devon this weekend to meet her biological mum, which is my dad's dog, and everyone was blown away by how obedient she is. The reason she is so obedient and so well mannered is because, and a shout out to Will Atherton and his dog training courses, which I invested in. I've been a calm, loving leader, which is his term, with this dog since the day I got her. And that means being patient, it means being understanding, it means being consistent and fair. And every single thing she does right, give her a treat, give her a cuddle, tell her she's great. Every time she does something wrong, gently correct her. There's so much overlap. If we spoke to
Mm.
ourselves like that, we would all be a lot happier. We'd all be a lot more confident. We'd all have a much higher self-esteem. And in turn, then we'd be able to give out that energy to everyone around us. So that was the kind of analogy that I used, and I believe it's really powerful.
Brilliant. Yeah,
I
it was
love
a
that.
brilliant analogy, and it was true. I loved it. It was great.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
I love that.
Well,
And Nala's found her way onto Masculinity Unmasked, which is
there you go.
which is
And the
fantastic.
helpless trends. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much gold in what you've both just said there, and I love drawing those comparisons, Simon. It was a lot of food for thought for me as well. Um, and for generations as men, we have been taught as to be warriors until we die, and burnout is just a form of modern day battle fatigue. And it comes from this constant drive, this energy to just drive forwards at all costs, and even in leadership, to be driving teams forward at all costs, churning through. And actually leaning into that more receptive energy, that more intuitive energy, of vulnerability, of self-compassion, is what can really hold teams together, drive innovation and productivity. And that knowledge goes back centuries. If you think of, yin yang, Shiva, Shakti, if you think of feminine energy, masculine energy, whatever terms you want to use for it, whatever we look at, that everything has an active drive forward energy, and everything has a softer receptive energy. If you look at a tree, sort of roots and its structure hold it together, but then its leaves are the things, the receptive things that make it grow. Nothing can survive without the balance of those two energies. But what's happened is we've had a real sort of lean on the on that more active energy for centuries. But all it's doing is just driving up burnout statistics. And actually, if we can lean into those more receptive energies, regardless of our gender, that's how we can, you know, create organizations and sustain organizations going forwards that are really, you know, looking after their teams and driving innovation and productivity from the right place, I think. So really, really great conversation with you both around this, and thanks so much for getting stuck in. Simon, if people would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Um, Google Simon Tomkins coaching, click on my website, and all the information is there. You can book a call, drop me an email, WhatsApp, whatever's easiest for you. Yeah, you know, I'd love to hear from people. Anyone who this resonates with. We've got an amazing team of associate coaches, of which Max is one, who are there as well to support you to do the exact types of things we're talking about today.
Mm.
So yeah,
Great.
look up Simon Tomkins coaching.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Simon. So our next conversation will be Authenticity Unlocked, Transforming Your Life from the Inside Out, where we're speaking to life coach Robert Hutchinson on 23rd of March, and that's not one to be missed. So thanks very much, everyone who's listened, and thank you, Simon and Greg, for your time. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me.